one of the things that I'd clocked as a kid growing up were the piles of cookery books Mum had in the kitchen. And Elizabeth Day was always there. So I grew up, with just steeping into my subconscious without even knowing it. I mean, it certainly wasn't drummed in. But it was daily life. And a great chum of ours had a shop on the Perth Road in Dundee, which was a great long winding road from the West End that brought all the goods from the docks that landed, because Dundee's right on the estuary of the Tay, and would take the goods inland all the way to Perth. And she had a little shop called Pandora, and Joyce and her husband John were great pals of my mum and dad. And they all went to art college together, and we all practically grew up together in some form or another. And she was given she was the first person certainly in Scotland, I don't know about England, and probably, but in Scotland, who was allowed to buy goods from the Elizabeth David shop in Pimlico and sell it. And it was the first time you could buy these amazing little pottery bowls and stuff. And Elizabeth David was a culmination of generations of women that go right the way back to like the 17th century. And somehow there was a bracket of often upper class or upper middle class women who, probably because they were so bloody bored, nothing to bloody do, sit there in their crinolines going, fucking hell, what another deal of this, great, wow, thanks. And they were involved, I think food was fascinating. They're going to feed the gang. Sometimes it was in a massive big house, sometimes in a steading, sometimes in an inn, whatever. Or just a home with kids, and gathered recipes and started writing these books. And in the 1850s, I think it is, Eliza Acton writes her masterpiece, Modern Cooking for Modern Women, which then was the spine for Mrs. Beeton. Mrs. Beeton comes along, who is so plebeian and bourgeois and boring. Also dead at 29. Her husband was a terror and absolutely workshopped her like there was no tomorrow.
What do you mean dead at 29?
She died very young.
What, what did her husband do to her?
Well, no, didn't do anything to her, but he took full advantage of, he really worked. He knew he had gold in his hands.
Right.
And so he took her reputation and just went off like a rocket. And
how did she die?
I think mortality back then was really, because it's pre-penicillin. So anything could get you. And so I think consumption, to be honest, I'm not sure. I would hate to tell a lie, so I don't know. I'm uninformed.
Sure.
But she was very young. And, if you read Mrs. Beeton, you'd think she was 150 when she died. I mean, when we do this, we always do, if you cooked everything once, you'd be... Anyway, amazing books. I mean,
what year was it for?
So Mrs. Beeton's late 19th century, early 20th century. And these are the women who start educating an emerging middle class of family.
Right.
Who have very reduced households. I mean, it's like they might have a maid and a cook or something. And a middle class family might have a cook. But women were getting interested in gardening and growing and herbs and health and salads, and all this was beginning to simmer. And then, of course, it's going guns firing by the time the 20th century emerges, and Britain's as rich as Greece's with this massive industrial, revolution that it's had, but bankrupt with this ridiculous empire. But the produce coming in, my goodness, so there was nothing they couldn't do. And so cooks were quite adventurous, and things were on the change. And then, of course...
What sort of stuff were people cooking then?
Well, I think there is old English food, which is timeless, like pork pies and steak and ale and roast beef and all the classics you can think of. Interestingly, not fish and chips. That didn't come till much later, bizarrely. And
when did fish and chips
I
come?
think it's the 50s.
Really?
I think it's post...
It's interesting. I spoke to a guy called Rory Suddenly. We were talking about the invention of Italian food.
Yes.
Apparently, it's a load of bollocks, like what we see as lasagna and pizza.
Yeah.
Well, no. That's a 50s thing.
All emigres. They just like slop. Give it to them. If it's wet and gooey, and if it's minced, they'll just chow down. Ragu. What is ragu? We eat mince and tatties. You go. That is ragu and tatties.
Yeah.
It's very funny. Always makes me laugh. So I think. A lot of that nonsense was general, but 2 world wars absolutely did for cooking in Britain without a shadow of a doubt. And the stuff when folk came back from the war, the last thing they were going to do was go back into their kitchens and start doffing their caps again. There was none of it, and no one could afford staff, even if they could get them. So the world changed. People had to start cooking, and
so just quickly, what were they cooking back in the? We know we said the pork pies.
Well,
this will jump around, by the way, loads. So
No, for sure. What were they called? 'Cause not being there, I don't really know. But I think it would have been a ham salad on. I think it would have been a roast on a Sunday, cottage pie on a Monday with the leftovers.
Yeah.
Cold cuts on Tuesday. Fish pie on Wednesday, and maybe a rack of lamb on a Thursday. Fish on Friday.
Yeah. That
kind of thing. Very plain, very ordinary, not exciting. And because fresh food has always been expensive when you live on an island. That because we import so much. And so curry was maybe curry powder. Well, Madhur Jaffrey comes along in the 1970s, blows that myth out. Madhur Jaffrey, wow, have you got some fun ahead? Yeah. The best cookery book. If you love Indian food and you like to cook Indian food, just get a copy of Madhur Jaffrey's Invitation to Indian Cookery.
Right.
And follow the recipes to a T. Done.
What year was this?
She was a very esteemed Indian actress, married to a man called Saeed Jaffrey, who then subsequently divorced.
Yeah.
And she, God knows how she got it. I mean, I was a kid. A teenager. But I used to cook at home as a teenager. It was when I was hiding into Mum's kitchen. So that would have been late 70s, early 80s.
Cool.
And she just stood, she just had this funny little set, impeccably dressed and made up, beautiful and so elegant, and just effortlessly made this food. And we were all like, just fell in love with her.
Yeah.
Just amazing. And so I think Madhur Jaffrey did for Indian cooking what Claudia Roden did for Middle Eastern cooking. And suddenly these women writers who were the authorities on their subject took their place on the platform. And they really did change everything, and suddenly folk were devouring their books like thrillers. They couldn't get them fast enough.
Wow.
And it changed everything. And our perceptions, and suddenly we're cooking, suddenly we're eating hummus. And suddenly we're cooking aubergines. And, a lot of dishes were annihilated on the way. When poor ratatouille, I don't think has ever recovered. Minestrone hasn't seen the light of day for, 50 years. As atrocities were committed by things and, folk not really understanding what they were doing. Or couldn't get the produce, so they just did terrible, it would be flour mixed with tomato ketchup cooked on just insane. Luckily, I didn't encounter much of this, except on very odd occasions where I go, Mom, yes, I told you so. They do that, So it was really funny. And there was lots of hilarity. And then crazy television, like the Galloping Gourmet. And so fancy food was quite interesting on television. But I was never interested in it. I was drawn to, if Claudia Roden was going around the Mediterranean, I was glued to the box. If Madhur Jaffrey was going around India and speaking to spice growers, I was there. But the machismo of restaurants didn't really interest. It was harking back, it's really interesting. And I didn't really know or understand or read about any of that realm until Anthony Bourdain, as you said, came along.
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks to your e-com and accounting software. It's helped islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is. Don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel, and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.